everybody. Welcome, thank you. On behalf of RBS, I'd like to welcome you all to the NatWest Conference Centre here in Bishopsgate, a relatively new facility which hopefully you'll find comfortable this evening. I was explaining to my family just last night that I'd be late home tonight because I was coming to this event, and can I just have a quick show of hands? Who was here last time round? Okay, so we've got some new guests to welcome as well. I was here last year also, although you might not recognise me because I've chosen to disguise myself this evening by not wearing my glasses. I think that it'd be fair to say RBS is incredibly proud of its multicultural networks and, in fact, all of its employee-led networks, of which we have a vast number. Many colleagues give huge amounts of personal and professional time to support colleagues and our communities, and I think the RBS Sikh network should be extremely proud of the contribution that it's made to those causes over the last, year and a half almost, I think it must be. 2019 is a milestone year in the Sikh calendar, with many anniversaries fallen and many still to come. Tonight, hopefully, you've had an opportunity to reflect on some of those, but I think importantly, we'll soon hear from the panel on some of today's issues and future issues, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to. We're running slightly behind time already, you would have noticed, so I will jump off the stage and invite Manjot to come and shepherd us through the next few minutes. Remains for me only to say thank you for coming today. Hopefully you'll have an enjoyable remaining evening, and please do feel free to come back whenever time allows. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So thank you, Mark. My name is Manjot Bambra, and on behalf of the Sikh Network, I'd like to welcome you all here this evening as well. So 2019 is a milestone year for Sikh anniversaries, and when we were sitting down planning the event for this year and thinking, what is it that we want to do for the annual event, we didn't want to commemorate just one event in particular. We decided that let's actually look at all of the events and address messages and values from all of the anniversaries. And so we decided that the theme for tonight will be honouring our past and embracing our future. So tonight, as Mark's mentioned, we've got a great panel of speakers who will share with us their stories. You'll have an opportunity to also chat to them afterwards outside with some tea and coffee, just outside in the milling area where we were just now. And I hope you use that time as well to meet with others, network with someone that you haven't met before, and enjoy a cup of coffee. The stalls will also be outside already. If you haven't had a chance to already, please visit them. There's some really exciting stuff out there, so they'll be set up still. Since the launch event, and actually I think it's a good opportunity to look back on everything that we've achieved, because we actually have achieved quite a lot. So we've got a short montage to play for you guys, so if we can play that now. it's so good to stop and have a think about everything that you've achieved, both personally but also in whatever groups that you work in. So for the Sikh network and everyone who's attended any of these events, even looking at the montage, I remember the first time I watched it, I thought, I can't believe we've actually done that much in the space of just over a year. So I think that's important to see. Great work. And I think when I also reflect personally as well in terms of looking back at the last 12 months, I think one of my own personal achievements working part of the network was taking time out and actually going out on one of the SWAT evenings where we fed the homeless on a cold winter's night. And not only was it a great reminder to actually be grateful for the things that you have, and it's a good reality check, but we had the opportunity to also go out with Ross McEwen, CEO of this bank, and also his leadership team, which was, again, a great networking opportunity, but also while doing something so meaningful, I think. And looking at the milestones that we're celebrating for this year, I think one of them is that 2019 marks 100 years since women were first given the right to vote. I'm pleased to see that there's a strong cast of females here tonight on the panel event. And moving on to the panel tonight, we've got Harkirat Asi, or Kirit, who will be facilitating the panel discussion this evening. So Kirit is a trained broadcaster presenting very comfortably both in Punjabi and in English as well. She's presented on Desi Radio since 2004, and she's also worked with the BBC, Asian FX, and she's run Punjabi TV station for UK and Europe last year. Alongside this, she's also a professional marketeer, with her strengths lying in developing and facilitating engaging arts and event strategies. And this is often within the public sector. Kirit has been working with local authorities, a host of MPs and high-profile individuals, the higher education sector, sports, and most predominantly, the arts. She's also recently been appointed as the Artistic Director for Punjab Arts, a newly formed CIC supporting British influenced arts and artists. Kirit loves championing and challenging interesting projects and reaching out to people to share valuable stories and journeys. It's a pleasure to have Kirit here with us today, and she's clearly done a lot in her career, so personally as well, it's great to have you here. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kirit on stage, and I hope you all have a lovely evening.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, Ji Aaya Nu, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you from me. I hope you've all managed to enjoy some refreshments and had a chance to see some of the activities outside. And thank you, Manjot, for that lovely introduction. And I've got to say, wow, and an even bigger cheeky thank you to the committee for choosing the most glamorous headshot of me. Just so you know that I don't usually look like that, I look like this. So I'm Harkirat, or known to most as Kirit. And what I love about my work, be it radio, on stage, with Punjab Arts, or the projects that I choose to lend myself to, it's getting to meet great people with amazing stories and insightful and often brave journeys, and then sharing those with an audience like all of you today. Sometimes they're stories that make you think and question. Sometimes they're emotional and make you feel something right here. Sometimes they invigorate you and call you to action. And other times they just leave you thoroughly entertained. I feel like I can already identify with the 5 guests that we're going to meet today. And I've got no doubt that you'll all be able to find your own connection with each of them too. Honouring our past, embracing our future is the title of today's event. The past is what shapes us, builds our character. It's what we can learn from. As individuals, as communities, and even as whole nations. But the past also paves the way for the future. Sometimes comfortably, and as we might hear tonight, sometimes not so comfortably. But when we're truly open-minded and inclusive, the future offers us paths to take, giving us options and the luxury of choice. Our guests all have their enlightening journeys that have brought them to where they are today. They demonstrate the Sikh values, Naam Japo Kirt Karo Vand Chako. Each of them has, either alongside a regular career or having given up a secure job, set up an organisation that selflessly serves people in some way. And it's all driven by their passion for what they do and impacts how we here might view our future and the choices that we might make. It's that passion that excites me, and I hope that it's going to infect all of you too in some way, and maybe even inspire you to join in and support them too. And at this point, before I go on to tell you more about our guests, I'd just like to personally thank the RBS Sikh Network for giving me the privilege of presenting these inspiring personalities to all of you. So thank you, it's an honour. In a moment, we're going to hear from our main speaker, Amandeep Madra, but also joining us today will be Polly Harar. She's a strong British women's rights activist who founded the Sharon Project in 2008. The organisation aims to educate, empower and inspire predominantly South Asian women to lead an independent life without fear. The Sharon Project has been the lead partner in Comic Relief's Our Girl campaign and is currently passionately championing futures for women. Then we have the founder of Include Me Too, Parmit Insa, whose personal experience has led her to set up this national charity which supports disabled children, young people and their families from all sorts of backgrounds. It offers a number of services and campaigns endlessly for the rights of these people in order to allow them to have the same choices and have their voices heard as equally as able-bodied people. From Tech Girls, we have Sukhvinda Kathuria, who I've just realised that we're somehow related. But she's passionate about bridging the huge gap between males and females in the technology sector and breaking down the misconceptions and the myths surrounding careers in tech by reaching out to young girls in primary and secondary education. And last but definitely not least, we have Nav Singh, sports scientist at Arsenal Football Club, but also working with Asians in Football, which is a not-for-profit organisation that has a global programme working with local fitness enthusiasts to bring change to their regions. But without further ado, let me introduce you to our first guest. He's the chair of the charity UK Punjab Heritage Association, whose work included that fabulous exhibition last year, Empire of the Sikhs. He's a celebrated historian and co-author, and last year received an OBE for services to Sikh and Punjabi heritage and culture. This year, we commemorated 100 years of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And that was on Vaisakhi, making it a bittersweet celebration of the birth of the Khalsa this year. Many of us waited with bated breath. Apology or no apology? His most recent book, Eyewitness at Amritsar, explores this event through precious insights and accounts. Here to share with us more about it, I present to you Amandeep Madra.
Thank you, Kirat, for that very generous introduction. Thank you, Mark, Manjot, Amrit, for hassling me on WhatsApp most of this week. Appreciate that greatly. Thank you very much for RBS as well for this thing. Right, my beautiful assistant will go to my next slide. First slide, right, okay. So audience participation before I do 10 minutes, promise you 10 minutes on Jallianwala Bagh. So who recognises and has been to the first picture here? I'm expecting a pretty full house. Who's been there with a Canadian cousin? Right, who recognises and has been to that middle one? Oh, lots of recognition. So that's the big Gurdwara in Southall, for those of you that don't know. Who recognises and has been to that third picture? So that's the memorial. Who doesn't even recognise it? Doesn't recognise it, yeah. Okay, so for everyone else, what is it? It's the memorial at Jallianwala Bagh, which is what I'm going to be talking about. It was built in the 50s, I think. I should know, I just wrote a book on it, but I think it was built in the 50s. Right, who knows what connects all three of those? No one. Okay, and that's what I want to do. I want to try to connect those three very contemporary places together, and I want to do that for a reason, because history is all about context. Neither the objects, and we saw some wonderful objects out there on that 3D thing, neither objects nor events exist in a vacuum. They don't exist in a moment in time. They're part of a continuum. And you have to understand what happened before and what happened next to really understand what that event actually means. So when I was asked to talk about this very kind of diverse range of topics about honouring our past and embracing the future, I thought, oh gosh, how am I going to do it? So I want to try to connect this event that happened 100 years ago to what's around us at the moment, and I thought I would do it with this talk. So let's go back before 1857, before 1919 to the year of 1857. If you know anything about Indian history, you know 1857 is a really important year. It's the year of the first War of Independence, as the Indians would call it, or the army uprisings. We often know it as the Indian Mutiny. And so mutiny is that act where soldiers attack essentially their commanding officers. And in India, this happened in 1857, where the Indian Army, which was made up of about 80% Indians and about 20% white Britons, mutinied against their British commanding officers. And just for a bit of context, remember that the British are a tiny, tiny minority ruling India at the time. They're outnumbered some 1,000 to 1. Sometimes it's 2,000 to 1 when the women leave to go back to Britain. So that tiny minority. And they rule India through a network of local commissioners, through local nobility, but also this very, very large, very well-trained, very veteran native army. And in 1857, sections of that army mutinied against their British officers, and thousands were killed over the 8 months of that period. Thousands of Britons, British people, white British people, were killed. And this was an event which struck right to the core of the Raj. These gruesome stories would arrive on British breakfast tables through the newspapers, and of course it shocked this country. And the men that fought back against it, that protected women and children, became heroes. And I'll give you a story of one hero. He was the hero he was a general of the Indian Army, a Briton, obviously. Hero of the bloodiest siege, the siege of Lucknow. He died actually at the end of mutiny from disease, just before he had become a baronet. But his death was mourned right the way across the empire. In fact, in Trafalgar Square, one of the plinths has a statue of him on it. So one of those 4 plinths that we know, one of which is famously kept empty. One of them is a statue of this chap. And then from Singapore to Canada, from the very edges of the empire, place names were even changed to remember him, including a road in the relatively small unknown suburb of Southall in West London, and where a road and a pub names were changed to honour him. And that man was Sir Henry Havelock. So that's Havelock Road, which we all know as being that place where the largest Gurdwara in Europe is, was named after Sir Henry Havelock, the hero of 1857. Now this has a connection to 1919, which I'll get to you in a second. Because that fear of a return to mutiny, of a return to that massacre, that kind of existential threat of the end of empire was right in the front of every Briton's mind in India in 1919. So if we do go to 1919, Amritsar, it's a very different place to that which you would find now. Now it is a very Sikh city. It's peak Sikh. 90% of the population are Sikh. It's got obviously the Darbar Sahib there, a number of other Gurdwaras, but it's very different in 1919. This was before it had been effectively ethnically cleansed of its Muslim community, which happened in 1947 when partition took place. But Muslims made up, and you can sort of see some of the residents there, Muslims made up about 45% of the population. Slightly fewer in number were Hindus, about 10 or 12% were Sikh. But the smallest population, but probably the most powerful, were Christians. They were a small number of British administrators, governors, policemen, and their families. And they lived in an area called Civil Lines, which was north of the city, very separated from the Indians that they ruled. And the Brits in India are quite kind of a curious bunch, actually, because they'd been there for 2 centuries. They'd been there for multiple generations, but they lived very, very separate lives to the people that they ruled. They dressed, ate, schooled, lived, worshipped, basically in the same manner as Britons did in the United Kingdom. And despite almost 200 years of being in India to that point, to Indians they remained foreigners. And the word foreigner in Hindi is Vilayati. And Britons borrowed that word back when they refer to Britain as blighty. It comes from exactly the same. It comes from the same root. So there are these crossovers, but they're very, very small. The Venn diagram is very, very narrow. And politically, the India of 1919 was very different. It was very tense. While in Britain, we were heaving a sigh of relief as World War I had concluded, in India, the mood was one really of expectation. India had supplied, Amrit, please. India had supplied 1.5 million men as volunteers to the war effort. Millions of pounds in materials and money. I dare say many of you have got ancestors that fought in the First World War, because 40% of that army came from the Punjab. And they came from the Punjab largely because Punjabis remained loyal during mutiny in 1857. But they also recruited very heavily because of the very authoritarian leadership of the Punjabi governor, the governor of the Punjab, Sir Michael O'Dwyer, who some of you may know. And Indians in 1919 expected some kind of quid pro quo, some kind of relief from the emergency measures that they had been putting up with for 4 years during the war. And there'd been these emergency measures to kind of basically suppress political expression for fear of some kind of uprising in this vulnerable state that Britain found itself. But compounding this was also economic hardship. Grain and fuel prices had gone up during the war. Taxes were slated to go up. Socially, the state had been ravaged by natural causes, the poor harvest, malaria outbreaks, an outbreak of the plague in 1917. And then toward the end of 1918, just as the war was coming to an end, flu had ravaged the state as well. And there's a remarkable and just shocking fact that 250 times as many Indians were killed by the flu in October and November of 1918 than were killed throughout the entirety of the war. Your families will invariably have been affected by that because it went across the entire state. And in addition to those social pressures, political pressures had been building as well. The First World War had in effect kind of supercharged political expression. It had kind of globalized the discussion that had gone on in the Punjab. And Muslims were being seduced by these notions of Khilafat. The Hindu Arya Samaj were pushing for ideas of home rule. In the Sikh world, the early days of the Gurdwara reform movement were really kind of a reaction to British control of Gurdwaras. But most terrifyingly, the British had been hit by this revolutionary movement, which came from Punjab, came from Sikhs in Punjab, called the Gadar movement, which really wanted to see an end to British rule, but through armed agitation. And if you've read Anita Anand's wonderful book, The Patient Assassin, which is ostensibly about Udham Singh, you'll know that she kind of lays open that story of the Gadar movement. So the thought from the British administrators of having to release all these political prisoners that they'd kind of kept in prison through the war, at the same time as all these soldiers were returning, was a terrifying prospect. So the reaction was to pass laws in India called the Rowlatt Act, which sought really just to extend that control, the iron grip that they had over India. And if there was a message that the sort of emerging independence movement needed to express to people that the British were in no mood to give any kind of control, it was the passage of those Rowlatt Acts. So the response was rioting, very, very serious rioting, right the way through India, from Delhi all the way up to Amritsar. And here is some of the writing. This is writing that took place on the 10th of April, so just 3 days before this fateful day on the 13th, which we're going to talk about very, very shortly, you'll be pleased to hear. And actually, if the massacre hadn't happened on the 13th, we would have been talking about this, because British policemen fired on Indian crowds and killed 10 to 15 Punjabis. And the most terrifying for the British, I think it was about 5 Brits were taken from their places of work and beaten to death, including one woman who was very severely assaulted. And for the British in India, this was the line had been crossed. So on the 11th, the city was on lockdown, and that's the moment where this gentleman appears. This is Brigadier General Reginald Dyer. He's a third-generation Indian army officer. His grandfather had come to India some 80 years earlier. As an authoritarian soldier who gave an order and expected it to be followed. He had travelled to Amritsar on his own steam. He had no purpose to be in Amritsar. He was cantoned in Jalandhar, but he came up there to try to give it some sense of control. And his character was formed as much by World War I as actually the events of mutiny. Mutiny played absolutely front and centre in his mind. To him, the return, any sense of rebellion was the embers of a second mutiny, a second rebellion, an existential threat to the Raj itself. What would have been in his mind would have been the massacres that followed the mutiny itself. So where there's an army of retribution that kind of runs through India, where as historians, we measure that in tens of thousands of civilian deaths. And those men that committed that were given statues and medals. And so for Dyer, this felt like a repeat of that. It felt like a repeat of that event. So 2 days later, on the 13th, could we get to the next one? So 2 days later, on the 13th, when he hears that despite his political orders for no political expression in Amritsar, he heard that a political gathering was taking place in the Jallianwala Bagh, which is a regular meeting point. On the day of Vaisakhi, as Geetath mentioned, when there would have been pilgrims there, a sort of potent mix of fury and duty kind of takes over. So when Dyer marches into the Bagh, a furious Dyer marches into the Bagh with about 90 Indian soldiers, what he saw was rebellion and revolution. What he saw was a potentially riotous crowd. He didn't see the mothers with their children. He didn't see children playing in their favourite green space in the city. He didn't see 80-year-old men with nothing more than playing cards. He didn't see pilgrims from the nearby Darbar Sahib whiling away the afternoon. He didn't see these things because, as he testified himself, it took him 30 seconds to enter the Bagh, to assemble his troops and to start firing. He saw defiance, he saw a rebel army, he was fearful, and he saw himself as a hero in the mould of Henry Havelock. Let me marshal the facts, said Winston Churchill in Parliament in 1920 when the massacre was first debated. And these are Winston Churchill's words as he summed up what happened on that day. He says, "The crowd was unarmed, except with bludgeons. It was not attacking anybody or anything. It was holding a meeting. When the fire had been opened upon it to disperse it, it tried to run away. Pinned up in the narrow place, considerably smaller than Trafalgar Square, with hardly any exits, and packed together so that one bullet would drive through 3 or 4 bodies, the people ran madly this way and the other. When fire was directed upon the centre, they ran to the sides. The fire was then directed to the sides. Many threw themselves on the ground. The fire was then directed to the ground. This continued for 8 to 10 minutes, and it stopped only when the ammunition had reached the point of exhaustion. If the road had not been so narrow, the machine guns and armoured cars would have joined in. Finally, after 379 people, which is about the number gathered today in this chamber, had been killed, and when most certainly 1,200 or more had been wounded, the troops, at whom not even a stone had been thrown, swung round and marched away." That's the event. We sort of know it well. In the century that follows the massacre, it's been picked apart by historians, by filmmakers, by artists, by politicians, by commentators. But what we've done, what myself and my co-author have done, is to try to tell that story from the point of view of the people that were there. They were there as victims, they were there as perpetrators, they were there as commentators and eyewitnesses, and we accompany that with images of the event. So this is our book, Eyewitness at Amritsar. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you about that now, but thank you very much for listening.
It's available outside to buy as well.
It's available outside to buy.
So make sure
And do buy it, because otherwise I have to take it back on the tube, and they're really, really good. So I need you all to do your bit for me.
I've got to say, that's my copy of the book, and that's a signed
Wonderful.
copy, so don't
Wonderful.
lose it. But there's some really amazing insights in that book, photographs and accounts. One account that touched me in that book was one of a wife afterwards with her husband staying the night after curfew, I think. And
Ratan Devi.
that's right. And do you want to tell us a bit more about?
Yeah, so just a little bit of background to some of these stories. So the massacre happens, there's a state of emergency placed on the city. Frankly, nobody knows about it. Nothing happens for weeks and weeks. In fact, it's not until the summer, so this happens obviously in April, it's not until the summer that really the first investigations really take place. And so these are men from the Indian National Congress. It's actually Jawaharlal Nehru's father, Motilal Nehru, a guy called Charles Andrew Freer, and a few others. They come up to Amritsar and they go door to door and they collect testimony, and they also find out who the victims are. And one of the doors they knock on is this lady called Ratan Devi, and she tells, it's a very, very moving account.
It is.
It's towards the end of the section on the actual massacre itself.
Yeah.
Because there is a curfew in the evening, and people now extremely fearful. Now the curfew has teeth, because they've been firing on people, right? So they don't go out, except this lady is clearly, her husband has not returned from the Bagh. So she goes, she finds the body, which is the most harrowing scene that she expresses, about how she picks through the bodies in the near dark to find her husband's bodies, accompanied, she says, by only the jackals and the crows that are picking
At the bodies.
these dead bodies.
Yeah.
There are the locals who are obviously not going to help because they're fearful. And she tells this in a very moving, and it is just an absolutely horrific way, how she spends the evening with her dead husband's body, unable obviously to move him, waiting until the morning to get help, listening to the moans of a child. Who she can't even give water to because there is no water in there. And that's why, I mean, it's one of the almost inspirations for this book, because those voices haven't been heard. I made the mistake. I quoted from Winston Churchill, but we do hear other voices, and I think these are the voices that need to be heard.
How do you go about collecting all these? You're a historian, of course, and this is the fourth book that you're co-authoring. So you've got other books as well. But how do you go about researching all of this and collecting these accounts? How long does it take to do something like this?
We've been, as some of you will know, we've been doing this forever. So, for 20 years we've been collecting things. And we did a book on the Golden Temple. It accompanied an exhibition we did in 2011. And by virtue of doing that, we've collected so much about the city of Amritsar. I'm obsessed by Amritsar. I go as often as I can. I was there last year, and you always find something new and different there. In this particular book, the real inspiration has been Dr. Kim Wagner, who's an academic at Queen's, and I was just helping him just on the side, just with a few bits and pieces, just to uncover some of the more other Punjabi language stuff, which are some of the names and things, and really that kind of out of those conversations spun.
And Kim Wagner is given the foreword.
Kim Wagner, we're very honoured to have Kim on board. In fact, he's looking like the secret third author to this work.
So I have heard him speak before, and he is extraordinary, but also so down to earth and approachable to discuss all this thing, and his insight into stuff has opened minds.
And actually, as a non-Punjabi approaching this topic, I think is really refreshing.
It is really refreshing. So we've talked about all of this now, and you got an OBE last year, so congratulations. But so many of us might then wonder, Order of the British Empire, why are you accepting that?
British Empire sucks, eh?
I had a lovely cab journey on the way here with a Nigerian driver called Moses, and I was talking about tonight and what we were going to talk about, and he had a lot to say about, Nigeria being a colony as well, and his views as well. So you accepted an OBE?
I did. British Empire. So there's kind of there's almost two camps around the British. And we wouldn't be having this discussion if it wasn't called the Officer of the Order of the British Empire.
Yeah.
So there's a camp that says, the British Empire sucks, British Empire is bad, it's terrible. And there's another camp that says British Empire good, railways, education, all that kind of stuff. And actually, British Empire complicated, right? It's a mix of things. It is all of those things. And actually, if you went to our exhibition on the Sikh Empire complicated as well. There's no... Empires are complicated things. There are a whole mass of contradictions. So I don't have that, just a personal level, I don't see British Empire good or British Empire bad. It's just complicated. And actually the joy is trying to uncover it and understand the impacts on us. For me, the OBE was, and the OBE was very specifically for services to Sikh and Punjabi heritage. That would not have happened 10 years ago,
Yeah.
right?
It's an amazing achievement.
The nation is seeing fit to recognise that Sikh and Punjabi heritage is actually an important part of our cultural landscape, I think is really important. And for me, there was almost no question about it. And probably more importantly, if I'd said no, my mum would kill me.
That's always the way. But
Yeah.
what do you think? You've said 10 years ago that wouldn't have happened. What do you think is happening that like 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have had so many Sikh networks in the city?
No, you wouldn't have.
What's
Yeah.
happening? What's creating this change?
No, you wouldn't. So some of it is like just groups like us, like the Sikh Museum Initiative outside, just doing really good work, and it's connecting with people. It's also us. I mean, let's face it, our parents didn't have time for this kind of nonsense, did they? They were settling
Busy.
in, they were trying to get kind of economically stable, and we've got that luxury to be able to explore some of those more fulfilling and richer parts of life. In my case, it's arts, heritage, culture. In the case of the other panel members, look what they're doing with their time to give back to not even give back to the community, just to do good, positive things. And that really is it's a real peculiarity of us, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
So I work for GlaxoSmithKline, and
I was going to say this is done on this. All this work that Amandeep does is in addition to having a full-time role elsewhere. So this is purely a passion.
Yeah, but it's also a team effort as well. So there's a lot of people that are involved with it. So I work at GSK, and there's quite a strong. I forget what they call it. Anyway, there's one of these acronyms. It's basically a Muslim network, like we have a Sikh network. And I was really surprised at how they look at the Sikh world as a model for what they could be doing, because they see groups like all of the people we're going to hear from today giving back, and partly because their interests, not interests, but because of everything that's happening in the news agenda, they've got all kinds of other issues as well.
Of course, yeah.
But I think we do these kind of extraordinary things for all of those reasons.
Well, thank you. We will hear more from you as the evening goes on, but thank you once again for
thank you very
your
much.
time and speaking to us about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. And
Thank you.
thank you. Polly's here from the Sharon Project. So, Polly, I'm going to get right in there with you. My way or the highway is something that lots of South Asian people experience, and particularly women, for lots of different reasons. And we also often feel like we rely on the community and the network around us to support us, and that we need their nod of approval to do the things that we do. Can you explain, it was your own personal experience that led you to set up the Sharon Project as an independent woman wanting to achieve things that other people didn't necessarily think
Sure.
were the norm?
Exactly. So in 2008, set up the charity. That's 10 years ago. Before that, at least about 10 years before that, I started to recognise that there was a gap in service provision for women who'd been disowned by their families and communities, and they had nowhere to go. And so I was approached by a lot of women, young girls, particularly during my college years, presenting themselves with issues around it's my way or the highway, in that as long as you live under my roof, you do as I say, not as I do. And so it was a very strong pull towards wanting to support these women, in the same way that many women find themselves in difficult situations and quite often don't know where to turn. So,
I was going to say, when women pull away, even if they've not done anything wrong and they want to go out and do something independent, because people don't agree with it, there's kind of almost a shame attached to it.
Yeah.
So people, like the rest of the community, will frown on them, even though they've really not done anything.
Absolutely. The perception of dishonour is quite often stronger than the actions. And so if somebody says, I saw your daughter talking to a boy, even if that's not true, it may well lead to harm or risk to that individual. To want to leave a violent or abusive marriage may lead to the community saying, oh, it must be her fault that they filed for a divorce. Divorce is still quite a big taboo in our communities. Let's not sugarcoat that. And actually, quite often, the harms that take place, and it affects men as well as women, but predominantly it's a gendered issue. Quite often, there's a lot of victim blaming. And so in that sense, it's almost like a learnt behaviour that, oh, well, it must be my fault because I didn't do as I was told, or I should have tried harder. And quite often, that's the part that prevents them from breaking free and moving forward. But you're right, the community play a big role. And even though they're not directly involved in the incident or the concerns of that family, they make it very clear what their views can be. And that, again, affects that woman's progress in moving forward. So, yes, the charity was set up specifically to support women, particularly South Asian women, who are at risk of or have been disowned due to abuse or persecution. And that includes issues that we deal with, such as forced marriage, honour-based abuse, dowry violence.
Dowry violence still exists
Very
here
much
in the
so,
UK.
absolutely. I mean, it's an increasing issue that we're seeing through our casework, but it's also been recognised, for example, through the CPS training that we've provided, through the judicial guidelines, but for judges, dowry is included in that. So we know that it's not people are starting to talk about it, but 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we couldn't talk about forced marriages, which is different to arranged marriages, just to point out. Arranged marriages are absolutely fine. Forced marriages are where no consent or duress is being provided. So that's a criminal offence. But dowry is also an issue that interconnects, because the intersectionality between forced marriages, honour-based abuse, and domestic violence can all be interlinked.
So say the police have been called to a house and there's an incident. And it might
Firstly,
be
you'd be lucky that the police were called to the house,
Yeah.
because it has to stay behind closed doors. But yes, let's
if it's
say
a
that.
dowry issue, for example, and I'm shocked to hear that in the UK a lot of that's still happening and that it's on the increase. If that's still happening, how do the police understand, the officers there understand what a dowry base? I mean, how do you even,
Okay.
how do they deal with that? What is their understanding what a dowry is and what it means and what's legal, illegal, and what's against, where the lines are so blurred?
We've got a lot more clarity now, but we've been campaigning around dowry abuse for many years. In answer to your question, the police now have a police response to dowry. We had a client many years ago, and she called the police because she was being held at home at knife point. She managed to Google the number for the police because she didn't know it was 999. They attended the property, they got her out of the property, and she was so thankful to the police. And then she turned around to them and said, but he's got my dowry. And they went, I don't know what you're talking about. That's a matrimonial issue. Surely it's a divorce thing, and you separate and you get 50-50. And she was like, no, it's my dowry. So we recognised that there was a huge gap in knowledge for the police forces to understand what that was. Now we have a national police response on a step-by-step based on legislation that's existing but less used, that the police can now use in order to retain property on behalf of the female in order to assess the ownership. And again, it's around the dowry issue.
And that's something that you do. So issues like dowry and the other issues that prevent women from progressing, you campaign for these women and you do it at lots of different levels. You're involved in lots of different forums. Do you want to just give us a little insight of the level of discussion and negotiations that you undertake?
Of course. Well, first and foremost, it's about client engagement. It's about supporting that individual.
Yeah.
So that client support is very important to us. But there's no point supporting someone if we can't change the mechanisms and the processes that affect the interventions she may approach. So if we don't provide police training, how will they know about honour-based abuse, about dowry? How will they know the differences and the signs to look out for around forced marriages as opposed to arranged marriages? So we have to do the training and work in partnership with organisations in order to ensure that the police, the legal system, because again we do a series of legal seminars, but also working with government around affects the most, and that's where affecting those policies is directly supporting those women to push forward.
Now, your key, you talk about educating empowering and inspiring women. And you have a number of projects that you run. I mentioned earlier the Comic Relief Our Girl project. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved? You were the lead partner.
Sure. So the Our Girl campaign was funded in 2016 for Comic Relief. And it was set up as a national forced marriage prevention and awareness campaign. So the key element being around prevention. We don't want these cases to occur in the first place. So what we did as the national lead partner, and anyone who's ever applied or received funding, let alone through Comic Relief, will realise you've got more hoops to jump through than a circus. So it was great that they took, they committed to us as at the time a small charity. And in order for us to make a real impact, we knew that it couldn't just be us doing it. So we tendered out 5 more charities across the UK to run their own Our Girl campaigns. Some worked within places of worship, some worked within schools, some worked within communities, but we all worked under a commonality umbrella of prevention. So it was really important. And in the 18 months, I think we reached over something like 6 million people with at least 11,000 beneficiaries, i.e. young people, directly supported through that campaign.
And this year you're working on a project called Futures for Women.
Yeah.
And that's really important because that talks about employability of these women. So can you tell us a bit more about that and how I know you're looking to engage with lots of partners and maybe there's people in this room that can help you today. So if you'd like to let us know a bit more about that and how, if anybody wants to get involved, can get involved with you.
Absolutely. So at the moment we have a programme based in Birmingham and it's working to get women who've been removed or excluded from the workplace to enter or re-enter employment. Why? Because particularly women who've experienced abuse will be further discriminated in seeking employment. And when you seek employment, you have financial independence. When you have financial independence, you have more opportunities, and therefore you can make more choices about what to do for your future. But what we found is a lot of these women have either never worked before, and particularly from BME communities within Birmingham area, or have been prevented from doing so to keep them controlled, if you like. So they face additional barriers and challenges to enter the workplace. They are a valuable employee because they are highly resilient, because they can multitask, and they can be very, very strong and strong-minded in order to get the work done. So what we've done is we work with our partners, our delivery agents partners in Birmingham, to look at getting women on an employability programme where they get qualified, and then they get supported towards interviews. They get a full makeover, so they have an outfit to wear for their interviews. So everything from shoes to handbag, in order to make them feel that they are valued. Then they have life coaching, one-to-one coaching with an employability expert. And then when they do get the job, which they will, because they are so determined, what happens is they go back for a second fitting and get a capsule wardrobe to keep them going to their first paycheck. For us, it was really important to look at what the barriers that these women face and address them. Things like how to pay for travel, to pay for lunches, for childcare. So we adopted this programme, which is bespoke to us, in order to ensure all those aspects are covered and that they are supported, not just on the employability side, but the other issues that they may be going on before, during and after. So we've just completed our first course in Birmingham. We have another one scheduled for the summer, and then a further couple next year. But in addition to that, we're now looking at bringing that into the London region.
The London region.
And so we're just in the process of developing what that will look like, because we want as many of women to enter or re-enter the workplace as would like to. When we talk to these women and we say, why do you want to do this? I want to take my kids on holiday. I want to have my own bank account. I want to buy a new pair of shoes rather than, and then they're very, very important things to them because they've never had that. One lady on the course had never been on a bus before. And when we said to, put on, got her travelled to get on the bus, she only lived 25 minutes from town. But she lived in that area, British born and bred, lived in that area, never left the area, got married in the area, had children. So for her to get the bus into town was a huge, big deal. Now she takes her daughter into town to get clothes for Eid. And she's like, I have changed everything in my family now because I can go, I know all the bus routes, and I can go out, and I've got more confidence in doing that. So in the first week of this course, we had 4 women who had job interviews. One started her first job ever yesterday. Oh. So we're incredibly proud. Thank you.
So how can anyone here help you? Very quickly.
As I've mentioned before, we're very much a partnership-led organisation. The more support that you can lend ourselves, it's not so much about getting recruitment, but it's about the other skills that can be provided, whether it's through volunteering or whether it's through connections, so that we can provide these futures, allow these women to embrace a future. They will then pass that on to their children. So any contacts, any networks, and anything that your organisation may be able to provide, again, these are all things that as a partnership-led organisation we would welcome.
And I know you're really shy about talking about yourself, but you are the role model for these women because it was your experience that led you to set this up. So you've done all of this and you've also inspired a lot of women around you and you've created a team around yourself.
Amazing team.
And some of them are here today as well, are they not?
Yep.
I think in the third row there.
My lovelies. Fantastic.
So thank you and well done. And I think both of you have something in common. Both of you have been awarded got the Points of Light Awards at 10 Downing Street as well. So how was that for both of you?
So the first time to Downing Street,
Yep.
and I went just a month before Cameron resigned. And then the last time I went to Downing Street, and Uncle will attest to this because I was there with Mr. Condola, it was a month before Theresa May resigned. So I think I'm the angel of death.
Yeah.
I thought you had a better experience.
Well, I was there for International Women's Day, and it was just before David Cameron had resigned. But it was, a really memorable. It's not why we do what we do.
I know.
But it's really important. It's not just myself, but recognising unsung heroes.
But you keep saying that you are a hero to so many of those women. And you need to celebrate that.
I'll take that. But I also recognise that we need to celebrate, for example, all the women in this room.
Absolutely.
And all the men who support the women in this room.
Absolutely.
They're also my heroes to
Yep.
keep me going. So, yeah.
We're going to invite to the stage Parmi Dinsa from the Include Me team. It was, and Parmi, your very personal experience that started you on your incredible journey, and that experience being your son, Callum. Do you want to tell us that story? It really does touch the heart, to be honest. So.
Oh, he's absolutely gorgeous. What can I tell you about Callum? It's absolutely a wonderful gift to have this little human being and making sure that they were going to, enjoy life, enjoy adventures, have lots of different experiences, really live life to the full. And and everything seemed to be going smoothly. And Callum was born premature. He decided, oh goodness me, I'm not going to wait, Mum. I want to actually come out and see the world. And then what happened is, with him being premature, he was in hospital for quite a while. And when he came out, he had underdeveloped lungs, and there's lots of complications with babies. And on a fateful day, which was on October the 2nd, with Callum going in and out of hospital consistently, he stopped breathing. His elder brother was actually, very very protective and thinking there's a new baby. So his elder brother was about just over 2 years old and wanted to sleep with mommy. I had just put Callum to bed. I had an awful cold because when you're running between hospitals looking after a prime baby, you do not rest. You're constantly looking after them. I must have gone to sleep at 4 o'clock in the morning. And this was around 7 o'clock. And Callum said, Mom, look, Callum's stuck. And basically it was, we grabbed Callum. I ended up ringing up the ambulance. Their dad tried to resuscitate him, and it was like his body was very stiff, and it's like we just about caught his last breath. And as you know, and having belief in Waiguruji, and then rushing him to the hospital, and I had this. All of a sudden, I was told that my son was having seizures because his brain had swelled up, and that's normal. After that, within 24 hours, which felt like 5 minutes, I had that experience that you'd never prepared for when the paediatrician walked into the room and said, if your son survives, which is going to be extremely unlikely, your son is going to have global brain damage. The floor under us literally went. Sorry, it's really... But what it is the fact that as parents, we are never, ever prepared for when things go wrong with our children. And all of a sudden, all I could see was these huge hurdles and mountains and, you know, realising that we're going to have lots of challenges ahead of us. But my goodness me, I was so damn sure there's no way that my son isn't going to have adventures and is not going to have a full life. Callum was put on a life support machine, and in terms of, you know, when we spoke, you know, when we were on the phone, the thing that really got me through was my faith, and I'm not just saying that because of the context that we're here today.
It's a very big thing for you.
Yes, it was very huge. I remember saying to my mother-in-law and my mom, who I'm extremely both close to both of them, saying, this is so enormous. I can't breathe. I don't know how to handle this. This is way too big for me. I can't seem to think straight, and I'm scared. And they said, just rub the Nalo. And I remember staying in these hospitals those nights, praying, holding my little boy's hand, and saying, and then it's all this realization in this world where we never really contemplate the impact it has when something like this happens. And all of a sudden, it was trying to understand the brain, because we're kind of saying, what's going to be the outcome for Callum if he pushes through? And then saying, well, it depends what part of his brain is actually being affected. But Callum had global brain injury. And then I remember sitting there kind of like praying to Waiguruji and thinking, okay, no matter what, you know, whether it's sensory, whether it's hearing, you know, physical, whatever it is, I'm just asking for strength. And oh my goodness me, he's amazing. He's our little warrior. Callum has got a whole range of complex needs, but he's beautiful. He walks into a room and he's sunshine. There's my baby. And we're having adventures. We went and did surfing, and ended up raising funds to make sure that other young people could end up benefiting by having an adaptable surfing board. So very much it was, that's how our journey started.
So he's been the driving force of Include Me Too, and he's despite the disabilities and the problems that he has, he's been your driving force. He's the one that pushes you.
He's everything that we've achieved to date, I'd say he's the advocate. All the young people and children that we work with, it's their spirit, it's their energy. And when people say, oh my goodness me, you've always got so much energy, you're always smiling, because my goodness me, I'm in such a blessed community. I'll share something, I think I said this to you. When I first had my elder son, I remember going into the city centre, and all of a sudden I think there was a mothership that had descended across Wolverhampton city centre, and all these mums had been descended onto the city where with their baby prams, etc. It's the same when you have a child who's got additional needs, because all of a sudden I could just tell a child, with having obvious needs, that they had an additional need. So it was, and
suddenly you were able to identify with other mothers who didn't have the opportunities presented to them that other mothers with able-bodied children had.
I think in terms of, it's the fear and prejudices that we're still facing here today, we're seeing in our communities, whether it be in the UK or worldwide. The biggest, it's people's ignorance, because it's sheer lack of knowledge of, in terms of, what the disabled community can contribute, what, their value, what value they have. I mean, ultimately, they are human beings, and at the end of the day, they're equally valued, to their loved ones and within their own communities. And it's really kind of breaking down the barriers, the stigma, the fear, the limitations that society tends to put on you. So some of you have probably heard about different models when it comes to disability. And first I was like, it's my son first. So I was saying, Callum, my son has a disability. And then as I started really understanding and starting getting more involved in this area, I understood, no, it's society that disables my child, but inaccessible buildings, poor attitudes, limited opportunities and choices for them to joy, leisure, recreation, all the things that his big brother would do. And even to the point earlier on with Callum's, it's very much, I fought for Callum to be in a nursery because I've always worked full time, and I expected him to benefit from the social interaction just like his elder brother. And we must have gone for 5-6 different settings, and basically realised that there wasn't a setting for Callum. And sadly, Callum's turned 20. 20 years later, there's other mothers having babies who've got additional needs who are still not getting the childcare that they need or the support they need so they can go out and work, and making sure that their child can have those opportunities that the non-disabled brothers or sisters or their peers end up having. So there's a huge amount of challenge. The barrier still, that still exists.
So your key points, things that you do in your organisation, you champion inclusion, diversity, equality, and my favourite is the adventures.
Oh, yes.
And then you've got Callum's Promise, which links to those adventures. So there's lots of organisations out there that support people and families, but what seems to make yours different is that emphasis on fun and fun with the family and making it normal and acceptable to everybody. And you have gone on to achieve so much, because you talk about it here like it's just this thing. You have just come back, and I've got to make sure I get this right, from the Conference of State Parties, is that right, last week?
That's correct.
And
yes.
you were part of the Global Disability Summit 2018,
We were.
and you're doing the summit again next year in 2020. Can you tell everybody what that actually meant? Because to be out there championing this cause for the UK with other countries.
In 2008, we did a whole range of work where basically, I'm going to just try to cover a couple of points. But basically, Include Me Too is very much about those families that were being unseen, unheard, the ones that weren't accessing services, weren't getting information. And that tends to be Black, Asian, ethnic minority and marginalised communities. But over the years, we've got more white British families living in disadvantaged areas, having social economic disadvantage as well, that we're also supporting. So in 2008, we did the first ever Charter of Rights by Disabled Children and Young People. And the young people said to us, and we did it by doing that kind of a whole kind of cultural kind of fun family event. We had 400 people attending. And young people were being interviewed by their peers that we'd worked with special needs schools and disabled peers who were interviewing and videoing, and it's about things that matter to them. So the Charter really kind of encapsulated, the things that matter for young people: being safe, being listened to, having a chance to thrive and be successful, etc. So when we did that charter, young people said to us, well, how do we make sure people are listening to us? So we cut it into 40 jigsaw pieces, sent it up to number 10 Downing Street and many national organisations. And we said, you don't want to be the missing jigsaw piece. So Tony Blair at the time signed up. And we had the Children's Guardian at the time bringing all the jigsaw pieces together, which we launched. So what happened was that on the 2nd of October was a day that everything changed for us as a family, as I just shared with you, where I was told, well, if your son does end up, coming out of this, he's going to be severely, brain damaged. And I found myself flying on the 10th anniversary of the Convention on Rights of Disabled Persons down to the United Nations, Geneva, where I spoke about the inequality in terms of intersexuality, race, disability, about the realities here in the UK. Sitting there, I thought, actually, as we're trying to raise and increase awareness amongst our communities because of the lack of awareness of disability, and that needs to be something we really need to start doing, supporting our communities to understand, so that their families with disabled children and people can actually have a sense of belonging and be valued. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, well, actually, a lot of our communities that we work with come from the Commonwealth. So we need to start thinking much more wider. We got in touch with the Commonwealth. Hence, we did the first ever, they had the Commonwealth Heads of Governments meeting here in London, and we did the first ever youth-led disability roundtable. Following that, Difford was one of our people that attended, and they were doing the first ever Global Disability Summit. And we said, well, where are children young people's voices? Now, we're a small organisation. Small, I guess, in terms of time, in terms of the team and resources, but in terms of determination, commitment, it's huge. You cannot actually put a value on or a measurement on what we do.
Think that's a theme with all of you so far. Small organisations trying to do something which is big and affect huge change.
Exactly. And so young people came together for the roundtable event and said, where's our voices? We're not actually having a platform to have these voices. So we did the Global Disability Summit. And what happened from that, we also had young people telling us, we did things on Facebook, Twitter, we had young people attending as a roundtable event. We gathered all their information, and we had young people represented from 23 countries telling us about things that matter to them. And what's happened from that, one of the developments was the Global Disability Children and Youth Charter. And we ended up going to the United Nations last week. We did our first ever side event, and that, in terms of for CIDP. And this was about giving the stage to children and people, saying about things that matter to them. And we've actually set up the first ever Commonwealth Children and Youth Disability Network. So next year, half the population in the world is young people under the age of 30. This is about ensuring, in terms of leaders, future leaders, how can we influence them? This is one of the key aims. How do you influence non-disabled persons, people as well, to take on this space and start really looking at what disability inclusion can look like? How do we take them to have responsibility to shape the world that, we really want to see, a vision of disability inclusion? So next year we have got, we're doing the first ever Global Youth Disability Summit in Liverpool in the UK. And this is an opportunity for young people to contribute towards the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 7 key ones, more specific to the disabled community. And this is about young people. Also, we're working with World Merit, who've done amazing work with young people. It's about them doing their own action plans, Sustainable Development Goals.
So you have your charter on your website, and
yes,
anyone
we do.
can
And
sign.
Yes, it's not just NGOs; it's about businesses. So in the charter, young people, what young people said, the three key things that matter to them was stigma and discrimination, having access to a quality education. That's not necessarily about academia. That's ensuring that young persons in an environment where they can really reach their full potential, have all their development areas supported. And then on top of that, it was about having access to economic employment, meaningful employment. And I think that's probably the challenge I'm probably going to throw your way, is go back to your organisations, talk about the charter, sign up to the charter. That is going to be put into a line with the DFID's charter from GDS, which is called the Charter of Change. This is about what you guys can do as well to ensure that we can really end up supporting young people to have the opportunities and choices to be economically independent, and also start looking in your own infrastructure how you can become more accessible and inclusive. And there's one more thing, can I say?
Come on.
Okay. Sorry, guys. One of the largest barriers for children and young people is about having an equal platform to those platforms that the non-disabled persons people had. And the reason we're doing this Global Disability Youth Summit was because there's huge platforms. But what happened is when young people have to kind of gather sponsorship, they can be anything from £1,500 to £3,000. It's difficult for them to find someone. So what you find on some international platforms, you've got large corporates, like some of those that you belong to, that will end up picking up and having their talent pool of young people, like 20 to 50, 100, attending these events, be able to network, to share their stories, influence the youth platform. But what is really missing is there isn't that kind of resource available for children and young disabled people who also want an opportunity to become a change maker. So we'd love you to talk to us afterwards and and leave your legacy, but not only just in terms of supporting it that way, but I think it's also about what you can do to support the Global Disability Children Youth Charter in your own different areas. Sorry.
I told you she was passionate, so you heard the passion there. So please do have a look at the charter and see how your organisation can get involved. And another lady now who's passionate about bridging gaps. I found out that I'm related to. So, Sukhvinder, I'm just going to go straight into it.
Yep.
You despise the gap between men and women, the gender ratio in the tech sector. What is the gap, and why are you so adamant that you need to do something about it?
So when I went to university many years ago, I did a degree in computer communications and networks, and I was only one of 2 females at that point that graduated on that specific course. That's not changed. We're still in that same situation where we don't have women in technology where we need to be. We're not in a diverse environment. And I think it kind of almost touches on what the other ladies were saying and how the connotations are around women. So men can do the same types of things, but they're kind of considered to be very confident. But if you get a female who's very confident, she's deemed to be bossy. So it's all those negative connotations around what we do. So that's how Tech Girls came around, because we need to be seen to be making a difference in technology, especially since we have, new technologies coming in, for example, deep learning.
The way the industry is going at the moment,
it's
lots of jobs in tech.
Lots of jobs in technology. In the next 20 years, 90% of industries will have digital skills.
So all of us here use social media, all of us here use our phones, that's tech there for you.
And the sad fact is we only have 17 women who work in technology.
That is really sad.
Yes.
How many people in here took a computer science degree or anything like that? And how many of you have got a career in computer science or use in tech?
I think the question would be around
And
how many people actually work, how many people work in an industry or some kind of career that involves technology.
How many of you that work in in technology, and how many of you are women? Can you stand up? One.
And she's my friend. she came with me. She came with me.
One back.
So that just...
and two more. And
another one
they're
at the
my
back.
friends also.
Okay, so that just demonstrates your point.
Yeah, it's only me and my friends that do technology. so we're the bossy ones. We're the bossy ones.
So at what point did you think you need to make a change, you need to set up something for girls?
So I worked in technology for about 15 years before I moved into education. And it was only 3 years ago, when my last job was as a quality manager in a college, that I specialised in digital apprenticeships, and I was seeing that the same types of people were coming through all the time. It was run completely free. I was using my savings to get around to different schools. I would run the workshops, do the business networking, write the website, do the social media, all of the things that you need to around a business, just to kind of do a little bit of market research around how we could get ourselves into schools, just to create that awareness. The problem schools have is they love the technology piece. They have to do computing as part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, schools don't have the funds for CPD for their teachers. So almost they're really scared to have those conversations with young people, because they think, right, if I'm going to talk about phones or if I'm going to talk about social media, they're doing it all the time.
They don't understand it themselves.
Yeah, so they don't want to dip their toe in because they're quite intimidated. So Tech Girls goes into schools and basically takes that onus away from the teachers to be able to just let us do it. So we just require a massive space and we run workshops.
There's something quite... we had this discussion, I think, earlier about it being quite binary, with guys being quite binary, so it's quite easy and it's perceived that tech isn't creative. But you're actually putting the creative edge out there for girls and teaching them that actually tech is creative.
So we teach them that tech is creative. We teach them that tech is about design and it's about innovation. It's really important for me that we get away from the mindset that tech is just coding, because currently that's the mindset amongst many young people, that I can't do technology because it is simply just coding, which it isn't. So our workshops teach young people that actually technology is about being brave, it's about having great ideas, it's about innovation, and it's about design. And technology is not just about creating another speaker or another light bulb or whatever. Technology is for our benefit. We can use technology for good. So one of the workshops that we ran this year, which was really successful, was around wearables. So we looked at wearables, and the girls were like, yeah, we know, we've got a Fitbit, we've got a smartwatch. But actually, how many of these wearables that we are buying do monitor female health? We are different from men. Things happen to us that don't happen to men. So it was really interesting, because when the conversation started to come around, from speaking to a bunch of 100 girls who would say, oh, well, I've got a Fitbit, that's fine. It's, it works, it measures my steps and my heartbeat. But actually, do we want it to measure a little bit more? Do we need it to look like a watch? Do we want people to know that we're measuring, X, Y, and Z? Is that what we need to be doing? And then they started to think about how, yes, we could be involved in this whole process of design, because there are people there. There are people there that have jobs in designing technology that we're all using, but
they're not thinking from a woman's perspective.
It's not diverse, yeah. And I don't even think it's females. I worked with an amazing girl this year who's she had autism. She had one of the best designs, and her slogan was "Tech for everyone." And so because of some of the work that I did with her, we're now creating a curriculum to make a more inclusive technology, because there are people out there, and I don't like saying that they've got special educational needs, because they don't. They are skilled people that need to be included in the industry that we have, and they're very extremely
Learn
smart.
differently.
Learn differently. That's all it is. They learn differently.
So you're going out into schools, and I know some schools can't afford the workshops and the programs that you run, and some of them you actually run for free.
Okay, so we had earlier on this year, we'd promised workshops to a school, and we were running it over 2 days, so it was 120 kids on one day, 120 kids on the second, so it's 240 children that would be impacted by the whole funding thing, which I absolutely hate. But so we were waiting for the funding to come in. The teacher and I were liaising for quite a while, and then 2 days before we were supposed to deliver, the funding body pulled out and said, well, actually, we can't afford the budget for this anymore. So the teacher from the school phoned me up, and she said, well, we're going to have quite a difficult conversation because this is the case. I was like, it's not a difficult conversation. We're still going to do it. And my team think I'm mad because the way I see it is tech girls can only be around if we work with the humanity and the passion that I have. So we delivered 2 days of funding across 200 students, or 240 students, for free. And I say to schools that we will go in and do what we need to do, but just have those conversations, because money can never be a barrier. It can never be a barrier. And the reason why I say that is because actually we all have a responsibility for the next generation.
That's our future.
That's our future. And it's like Emily was saying, that our parents were so busy trying to make us financially stable. My dad used to work 7 days a week, keeping us stable, sending money back home. My memories of him, and he's still working today, he's a pharmacist, but my memories are always being with the shop and hanging out with him at the shop. We didn't have these kind of conversations around what do you want to do with your career, how can I help you, what do you need to influence you. And I think these are the responsibilities that we have for the next generation, because they are, we are accountable for all of these people. And we have a responsibility, we have the time. We need to let the young people know what their opportunities are, how they can influence industries.
So how can anyone here help you today, your organisation today? Because it's still a very small organisation.
It's still very small. Within 3 years, we've reached approximately 2,000 young people across schools in Essex and Kent. But what I would say is we are constantly looking for partners to be able to narrow the gap between industry and education. We just want to raise aspirations.
No, thank you. And last but definitely not least, I'd like to invite Nav. Nav Singh from Arsenal to the stage. Not a football player, but a sports scientist at Arsenal. And I've only met you today. I haven't had a chance to speak to you like I've spoken to the others in depth. But, oh my Lord, an incredible journey. And I've got to say, first of all, Nav's extremely tired. You've flown in from LA this morning and you've come here and you're conscious about being too casual, but I think you're absolutely fine. Thank you for doing that. You've been with Arsenal for a long time now, 7 years, but it's been a really bumpy ride for you. It wasn't when I first started speaking to you, how I expected it to be. In short, can you tell me first of all the exciting way in which you found yourself at Arsenal?
And I've been sat on a plane for 16 hours. So hopefully you can agree with me and you can pay attention to this conversation. Firstly, I was on the plane earlier and I watched a great TED Talk, and what the woman said on this TED Talk was quite inspiring. It was a greeting by the words of Sal Bonner, which means I see you, I acknowledge you. So if I don't speak to any of you today, I see you today, I acknowledge you, and I thank you so much for being here and listening to me. So firstly, thank you very much. I want to take you down a little journey of where I've come from. As a sports scientist at Arsenal, I played football all my life. It's literally who I am. It's literally, you look at me, you say my name, you think football. how I ended up in that role was a great journey. Went through football all the way up to 19 years of age, tried making it professional. One of my best friends said to me, "We are not educated enough. We will not play this game at the highest level." And I said to him, "What do you mean? Like, let's keep trying." He was like, "No, let's get educated. Let's get our A-levels." As soon as that happened, I thought, all right, got my head screwed on, went into college, and I thought, I'll do my A-levels. As soon as I did my A-levels, I live in Grimsby. Does anyone know where Grimsby is? That is where I'm from. And in that point, me and my best friend was, let's go to university together. I said to him, I'm going to go down south. I got in contact with the first ever Indian football coach I've ever met. Couldn't believe it. Now, by the name of Bal Singh, he lives in Letchworth. So anyone knows who he is? Honestly, he's a great man, great human being, and he's a big inspiration of mine. And within that, I thought to myself, okay, I'll move down, I can learn from him, and maybe I can be a football coach or a PE teacher, as we spoke earlier. And then from there, as soon as I moved down south, I saw a different world. Obviously, from being from Grimsby, you can imagine what world I was exposed to being in London. Spent a year as a university student, and an anonymous internship came up. I was playing for the university football team. I was with students that were from cycling background, track and field background. I could not believe that I was kind of, firstly, in university. And actually studying. I was playing football for the uni team. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to just relax, enjoy the experience. And an anonymous internship showed up. That internship was, if you passed the second year, you got the interview. And I was like, okay, passed my second year. Out of all the footballing lads that were with me, I was the only one who passed it. Guess who the internship was with? Arsenal Football Club. Could not believe it. Walked in the door. First thing, at London Colney, I was thinking to myself, what am I doing in a professional organisation like Arsenal Football Club? Shaking, absolutely, did not have a clue about sports science. Walked in, the interviewer says to me, the coach said, "You have no idea, but I'm going to give you the job anyway. And in a year's time, I want a book on everything that you have learned today." And I said to him, "Yeah, for sure." He says, "I don't want you affiliating yourself with any of the players or anything." I said, "There's only one person I'll ever get starstruck by, Thierry Henry." He goes, "Oh, that's fine, he's not here." 2 days into, 2 days into my internship, who shows up? Thierry Henry with his daughter. I literally cannot lie to you, I was shaking. I could not speak to this person. I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest football player of my life, my idol. In that moment, I knew I had been given a blessing. I knew in that moment what had God given me. And I just basically cut myself from the world. I put my head down. I knew I wasn't smart enough, and I put in the work. I literally was there from 7 in the morning till 8 in the evening, making sure they knew that this lad loved the game and he was trying to do his best. At the end of this internship, I gave him the book. I gave him the portfolio of work. I said, yeah, I'll go back to university. Went back to university, couldn't believe the experience. I get a phone call. First team manager. You don't know who the first team manager is? "Oh, we don't want to make a new appointment. Any chance we can get you back in, because the other intern, he's not doing what you did. He wasn't putting the extra hours in. He wasn't a footballer. He likes badminton." And I thought, I said, "Who have you appointed?" He was like, "Oh, he specialises in a different field, but he just didn't have that personal skill that you have." And I went, 100%. Went back into the club while I was studying. And then, just worked for the club, studied, finished my degree. Restructure of the department, I lost my job. I thought, oh, amazing, I worked so hard. I'll get a job by the end of this. This is all free, by the way. I did not get paid. So I had another job to get paid, and I had a mum and dad looking at me going, what are you going to do? What are you going to end up doing? What is sport going to give you? And then I thought to myself, all right, let me keep going. There's something here. This is what I love. And at the end of it, after leaving the club and the restructuring, I get another phone call. I'm working 3 jobs back in Grimsby. The Arsenal experience is behind me. I thought, all right, 3 jobs. Get a phone call. "Nav, can you come back in? It's on an intern's wage though, we need you." I said, yeah, of course. I rang my dad. He said, "You got nowhere to live?" I said, "I'll drive." So for 4 hours work, I would drive down for 4 hours, drive back for 6. I did that for 6 weeks. All because I wanted to work in sport. My dad's looking at me going, you're crazy. My dad's going, oh, I'm going to write a letter to Arsene Wenger myself. And I'm sat there going, no, maybe something will come from this. It's because it was the whole experience. Like, I'm pretty sure there's everyone in here. I know everyone here loves the sport. Again, I then venture within the club from an internship to a salary, finish my MSc. I get the job of my dreams. I am literally, this is where the Arsenal experience ends. Well, not ends, but I get the job of my dreams. I'm the happiest I've ever been. I'm literally finishing the season, 7 years of hard work, 6 years of hard work. I'm on my 7th year now. 6 years of hard work. I'm thinking, that's it. Like, wow, I'm here. Good age, got everything. Relationships are good, family's good, financially secure, can pay for my own car, which I don't think I can actually pay for my own car. And I say to my dad, I want to give back. Like, how do I give back? Like, the concept of server, to give back with no return. I thought I was truly blessed. I actually thought I was. And my dad said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I can't do it in the ways that you do it. What if I do it in sport? I then saw a group of students out in India that used football as an escape from abuse, escape from rape, and that was it. I was glued. I said, Dad, by the end of the year, I'm going there. And he was like, 100% go. Other people around me said, yeah, that's amazing, do it. I thought to myself, all right, fair enough, I'll do that. Go on holiday, start a new season, on a boat trip to Ilha Grande. Most beautiful place in Brazil. My dad gets a heart attack, bang, straight off the back. I'm sat there, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I supposed to do here? Like, life just went, how can you work this hard and then this crumble? So the Arsenal experience is there. This is where the Asians in football thing comes in.
For those, for those that don't know, you set up Asians in football.
Yes.
And that's what's been taking you around the world.
Yes.
And that's where you've just come back from.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've just been to India.
I've been to India, I've been to
Canada, Portugal, then LA, and now you're here.
Colombia, Chandigarh, all within the space of 2 months. All because of just
your love of football.
My love of football, and the fact when my dad had his heart attack, other things broke down amongst all that. I went. I thought I'd give back again, and I went. And there's a special individual in this room. His name's Ravi Singh, and I think he's still in the room right there. So literally, as things literally fell apart, my dad was sat there going, "You still not grateful?" And I said to him, "What do you mean, Dad?" I went, "Because you're still not grateful." And I was just, I didn't know how to assume what grateful was. I've worked so hard. How can I work this hard and then all this stuff happened? And I said, "Oh, okay." I signed up for a 5K run, which the Carl Said run. And I took my dad with me. My dad came to support me during hard times, and he went, "I'll run it with you." He's 6 weeks post-surgery. I said, "What do you mean you're going to run it with me?" He goes, "I'm going to walk it." He goes, "I'll show you what life's about. I'll show you. Let's go." So I've literally run this 5K, think, he's got my mobile phone. How am I going to find my dad? I ran the whole 5K as fast as I could, and I'm literally trying to catch him back up. And we finished the finish line, and Ravi's at the end of it, filming me going, "I cannot believe this." And the band that he gives me, this is my dad's band, I hold it to me so close to my heart. Because my dad told me that, listen, like, no matter what comes into your life, you embrace the wins, but you embrace the losses as well. You take life for what it is, and you take it, and you drive with it, and you keep the change. And then Asian football's then started. I thought to myself, in my duty and what I know in sport, as an Indian, as a minority in sport, and there's 8% of the UK population, and there's not one sportsman in it, I thought I have a duty now. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to educate our own on what it takes to be an athlete, the mindset of what it takes to be an athlete, and the passion needed. Venturing out to countries around the world, if I cannot change lives through sport, by teaching them, I'm going to find a way. And then that happens all within my spare time. I do live by a saying called Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. And that means the people that are around me make me better. and that's who defines me. Thank you very much.
You had an incredible journey and story to share, and that boss that called you, that manager was Arsene Wenger, so what was it like? I've got to ask you, what was it like getting a phone call from him asking you back?
Well, since after finishing, I still hold a close relationship. Very happy to say I have his phone number.
I'll be stealing your phone.
And I spoke to him about Asians in football, and he said, no, at 22 years of football, I've never seen one Indian footballer walk through my doors other than you. And I was just like, I'm not a great player, by the way. But he was just like, there is something missing. I don't know what it is. Look at these amazing people in front of me. You all hold great positions. All great, but within sport, what do we hold? And then that's when I thought I'll take the weight that I see very influential people take, Ruby in the back. I thought I would take that as my weight and try to drive that vision within sport. And then try and make people understand what it really takes to push yourself physically. And what I found in India is, what I found in India with those girls is what passion. If you could bottle passion, like go to these unprivileged, these areas where they have nothing, and watch what sport does to them. When all you have is you wake up, you have nothing, or look, your family surroundings ain't the best, and all you have is sport, and it lights their face up. That's what passion looks like to me.
On that note, there's a video you must watch. So there's a video of these girls and somebody speaking for these girls about the change it's brought to all these women's lives. And it's actually really empowering. And it's actually emotional to watch. But it gives you so much happiness to see. I mean, it must be great for you because you made that change happen. In their lives, and they are incredibly grateful. And I think you're working to raise money to...
Yes, we are.
For a pitch for them out there.
Yes, we are. We have, and then from July 1st, we're going to start a campaign to try and to raise money for a football pitch, because as we left, we documented the whole journey. We documented everything in Toronto, and we're documenting things further, specifically within our community. And we asked the girls, like, what can we do for you? Like, we can't cure what's going on in your life. And they just said, we don't want to walk to a football pitch anymore. Like, they wake up at 4 a.m. to travel on a bus for an hour and a half, to walk 40 minutes in the dark, light a fire with plastic, wait for sunrise, then play football for an hour, and then at 9:30 go back home to chores. And then that for me was just like, that was just my purpose for the day.
And we think we have it hard. No, but it's an eye-opener.
It definitely is. And I'm not sitting here saying that there's not many other people that are exposed to that sort of life. But for me, it's a purpose for me that I think I should deliver that football pitch to them.
Okay. I've got to say, I'm really conscious of time, so we have overrun. So thank you for all of you for being so patient. But I've got to say thank you to all the guests here. You've got to agree with me that each of them is doing something really, really important, which impacts all of our futures and future generations as well. And if there is a way that you can support them, please do. I'm incredibly honoured to be sitting here with all of you, so thank you. And thank you to the RBS team as well.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm going to be very brief because I know, Palmer, you've got a train to catch at 9 p.m. Just a few thank yous on behalf of the Sikh Network. Firstly, thank you to Geeta for hosting an excellent and very informative panel discussion, which was full of passion, drive and determination. And I really liked the fact that you did ask some of the tough questions, especially to Amandeep about why he accepted the OBE. So well done. I'm just literally going to say one line about something new I learned from each of the panelists today. Some of it I did find really hard to listen to, especially with young children and a family myself. But things like Polly said, dowry violence still exists in the UK today. Callum, what an inspirational young man, and Polly, what an amazing mother. And at that point, when I was kind of holding it together, somebody whispered in my ear, "How does she have a 20-year-old son? She's so young." Sukhvinder, in the next 20 years, 90% of industries will involve technology. Nav, he just likes driving. I jest, but quote phrases like "I see you," "I acknowledge you," and Ubuntu. I've never heard that before. It's a pleasure for us to have you here, especially for me personally, being a lifelong Arsenal fan and season ticket holder. Just thought I'd say that. And I've got a friend here, Kuljit Singh, who I thought was the funniest Singh I'd ever met in my life. But I'm in the peak Sikh. I've never heard of that before, so that's fantastic. I'll promise to buy your book, and I won't even ask for a discount. So, with that, I'd like to, show a token of our appreciation from the RBS Sikh Network in terms of a sincere thanks, and we would like to present each one of the panelists with just a small token of appreciation. So, Mark, would you be kind enough to join us up on stage? And a member of the RBS Sikh Network will bring the flowers up. So Jasvinder first, and could we please have Sukhvinder as well, please, up here. Amandeep, could you please come up, and to present your flowers from the RBS Sikh Network will be Nirmal. She's even laughing, you've not even spoken. Could we have Nav up next, please? And Nav, your flowers will be presented by Rupinder. And last but not least, our wonderful panel host, Gideath, would you like to come up, please? One final award for the evening. Last year, we launched the RBS Sikh Network Community Seva Awards, Seva meaning selfless service. We wanted to recognise those individuals or organisations that serve their communities and help others in need. At last year's launch event, a lot of people in the bank got to hear about SWAT, or Sikh Welfare and Awareness Team, for the very first time. We were so inspired that since then we have had teams from all parts of the bank, including our CEO, Ross McEwen, and his board, volunteer and go out and support SWAT in their efforts to feed those in need. What SWAT do day in, day out is truly inspiring. And whilst I know they received the Queen's Award for voluntary service earlier this month, I'll be delighted if Randeep from SWAT would come up and accept our little award and say a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Embracing our future. I think this is a message for all the men here, with all the amazing women that was sitting here tonight. You boys better embrace your futures with what's on the table coming forward with all these amazing women and with the men. I'm really seriously lost for words. I didn't expect this. Maybe we should give the honour of this to Guru Nanak Dev Ji, whose blueprint we are copying and following. Maybe we should give this award to every single volunteer and our supporters who we have in the room today, and every single volunteer we have with us today. I'd just like to say thank you to the RBS Network, Amrit and his team. I'd like to say thank you to God, to all of you guys here today. We would not be doing this today if it wasn't for every single part of that jigsaw, and RBS are an integral part of that jigsaw. So I'd like to say thank you. I'd also like to say, if you guys would like to get involved with us, please do. We started off by just feeding the less fortunate, and the homeless. But today we're doing a lot more. We're going into schools, we're going into government buildings. I met Meghan Markle last month. I'm meeting the Queen next month. I'm going to stop there. Aramit's going, job karja. So I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to all of you guys here. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Honouring our past, embracing our future. I wrote that down on a piece of paper about a month ago, and a colleague went past and said, typical Liverpool fan, living in the past, right? And when I was thinking about what to say here tonight, I kind of thought, in the past, there was a real strong link between my football with a real club and my faith as well. And I know when it started on the 13th of March, 1982. Now, in those days, there wasn't much football on TV like nowadays. Yeah, it was on the radio. And all I had was a small transistor radio with a big aerial that you had to kind of move around to get a reception. And I would sit there listening to it. And on this day, Liverpool have reached the League Cup final and they're playing Spurs. Any Spurs fans?
Yep. Remember,
yeah, for those that don't understand Scottish, Scott is my line manager, and I do have my half-year review tomorrow. And he's a Spurs fan. So I'm listening to the game, and Liverpool are losing 1-0. And my mum comes in and says, come on, we've got to go to the Gurdwara, the temple. So being a young, innocent, obedient boy, turned the radio off, went to the Gurdwara. And while I'm there doing a little prayer, I've kind of added a bit on. I've said, God, please, if you're not too busy, can you please help Liverpool because they're losing? Yeah, but only if you're not too busy. And I carried on. Went home that evening, and the news attendants are starting, and they're doing the gongs that they do. And with the last gong, they went, and Liverpool have turned it around and won 3-1. So pandemonium, running around the house, clip for my dad, making too much noise, 10 o'clock news, want to listen to it. Now, if that happens once, it could be a coincidence, right? Following year, right, Liverpool have reached another final, and this time they're playing this mid-table team called Manchester United. And again, they're losing. And again, there's something going on at the Gurdwara. This always happens. And Mum says, come on, we've got to go to the Gurdwara again. I went, okay, radio off, young, obedient, innocent little boy, went to the Gurdwara, do my prayer, and I've gone, God, it's Manchester United. Come on, you can't let me down. Yeah, just like you did last year, please, 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 can you help? Did my prayer, game, went home after the programme had finished to find out the game's turned around, and Liverpool have won, 2-1. So now I know I've got this connection with God, right? And I know he listens to me. Over the next few years, this kind of pattern, it kind of repeated itself. And I guess to 1987, right? And the kind of dark shades of adolescence and moodiness have kicked in now. And the other difference is this: we've reached the final again against Arsenal. But this time it's on the TV, right? And there's no way I'm going to miss it. But there's something going on at the Gurdwara again. And Mum says, come on, we're going. So I've gone, oh, I don't feel well. Cough, whatever, temperature. Mum, I can't go on, my legs are shaking. So they've come, give me that kind of look that parents give you when they know you're lying, right? Left the room, quickly, I'm on the sofa, remote control, TV on, I'm watching the game, Liverpool score. And then what happens?
Charlie
Nicholas happened, right? So I'm convinced to this very day that had I gone to the Gurdwara that day, right, we would have won, right? I'm convinced it's all my fault. But I was thinking, I wonder whether there's some Arsenal fan somewhere on the same day who's gone to the Gurdwara and gone, please God, we're playing blooming Liverpool, can we win? That was 87. 89, 2 years later, was one of my darkest days in football because I was a student in Sheffield when the Hillsborough tragedy happened. And that's been well documented. It's been 30 years. But it's been 35 years since the attack on the Golden Temple in 1984. 35 years. And I went to India and Amritsar for the first time ever in 1983. And I saw the Golden Temple, and I thought it was the most magical place I'd ever seen in my life. And those that have been will agree there's nothing like it. And then to see it, to see what happened a year later, it actually broke my heart completely. That was 35 years. 100 years ago, the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, which Amandeep spoke about so eloquently, and we're still waiting closure on that. That's why it's really important that we do continue to listen to people like Amandeep. We read his book. My son knows very little about what's going on. I have to explain to him because you kind of lose it with time and history. So it's very important that we keep that flame alive. It's also important that we embrace the future. And we've got what I call catalysts of change, like Sukhvinder, like Polly, like Parmi. The things that you women do is absolutely awe-inspiring. I've known Parmi for a number of years, and we're connected on Facebook, and I do not know where you find the energy from. It's amazing. And Nav, I mean, you've got a busy summer ahead, right, with the club. But what you do with children around the world and your story is very, very inspiring. So that's all I'm going to say. There are a few thank yous. I mean, the panel, brilliant. Thanks for coming down. You've come all from Birmingham, Palmy. Much appreciated. Nav, you landed this morning at 2 a.m. and you saw, I thought you were missing in action when I couldn't get hold of you last week, but you've turned us up fantastic for that. A couple of other thank yous. Thank you to Mark for joining us this morning and, representing the bank. Thank you for Manjot for doing the intro and for Dara for stepping in and, doing the presentations. Thank you also to, I don't know if you're still here, Amrit Maan. Are you still here? So Amrit is such a fantastic guy. I mean, the food is by courtesy of Punjab Restaurant. But I met Amrit last year on a SWAT evening, and I was talking about a career immersion evening that we were going to hold for students to help them and guide them. And he said, you know what, Amrit, what you're doing, Amrit, what you're doing is fantastic. You can have the food for nothing, for this one evening. So he encourages and helps and supports us. So thank you very much for that. And the fact that we've got Randeep Singh and Ravi Singh in the same room tonight, nothing could be more better than that, could it? So it's brilliant. So that's all I want to say.
Yeah, it went really well. My first time I had RBS the Sikh network they went to. What was impressive was that apne kinne jare Sikh professionals RBS काम कर रहे थे London ਦੇ ਇਲਾਕਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. And above all, I think the panel of speakers were very, very inspiring. I think ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਅਮਰਦੀਪ ਸਿੰਘ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਲਿਖੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਉਹ ਜਲਿਆਂਵਾਲਾ ਬਾਗ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਤੋਂ ਨੇ ਛੋਟੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਸਨਿਪਟ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਪਰ ਉਹ ਸੁਣ ਕੇ ਜੀ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਕਿਤਾਬ ਬਾਈ ਕਰਕੇ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਪੜ੍ਹੀਏ ਤੇ ਪਰ ਰੀਅਲੀ ਆਈ ਹੈਵ ਟੂ ਸੇ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਪ੍ਰਾਊਡ ਫੀਲ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਫੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਤਬਕਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਨਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਅਚੀਵ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਯੂਕੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਮੈਸੇਜ ਇਹ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਆਪਣੀ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਵੀ ਆਰ ਡੂਇੰਗ ਰੀਅਲੀ ਵੈਲ ਯੂਕੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ ਦੀ ਜਾਣੀ ਕਿ ਅਵਸਥਾ ਰੱਖਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਪੋਜ਼ਿਟਿਵ ਬੜਾ ਕੁਝ ਸਿੱਖਣਾ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਪਰ ਬਜਾਏ ਇੰਨਾ ਕੁਝ ਹੁੰਦਿਆਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਵੀ ਨਾ ਆਪਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਵੀ ਚੜ੍ਹਦੀ ਕਲਾ 'ਚ ਹੈਗੇ ਤੇ ਆਪਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਨੂੰ ਭੁੱਲਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
My name's Sukhvinder Kathuria and I'm the founder and director of Tech Girls. So I started Tech Girls 3 years ago after working in technology for approximately 20 years. So currently we're working with schools to engage more girls in technology. There's a huge disparity at the moment with girls not being engaged in technologies and in the technology careers. So we basically go into schools to deliver workshops across so far Essex and Kent, but we plan to increase that the range of schools that we're able to access. It's really important that girls from our community consider careers in technology. So in the next 20 years, 90% of industry will have digital skills associated with it. So if the next generation or if our children are not involved in technology, then in terms of their careers, their trajectory will look very different. So it's really important that we reach out to our people. It's important that we reach out to our children, our next generation, so they can be influencers of technology and not just consumers of technology. So we are currently looking for partners to support Tech Girls. We'd like to increase our range of the breadth of schools that we're currently associated with. We're looking for partners to narrow the gap between education and industry because at the end of the day, the girls that we're working with, will be going into industry and we're trying to build a really healthy talent pipeline to create a diverse industry.
Hello, my name is Polly Hurrah and I'm here from the Sharon Project. We are a charity that supports women, particularly South Asian women, who have been disowned by their families or communities due to abuse or persecution. So many of the issues that we cover and deal with are things such as forced marriages, domestic violence, dowry abuse and other harmful practices. So it's really important for us to support women and empower them to rebuild their lives without fear. I think it's really important within our communities that we continue to open these conversations and discuss what's happening behind closed doors, to not hide behind the fact it might be happening to someone else and recognise it could be happening to somebody you know. So when it comes to accessing support, by having these conversations, we're actually saying it's okay to discuss these matters. And I think events like this from today really help to take that conversation forward. And it's going to be really important for those people who don't have a voice to realise that they are being heard.
Hello, my name is Nav Singh, sports scientist at Arsenal Football Club, here at an amazing event held by Royal Bank of Scotland. I just want to say thank you to Bhupinder and Amrit for hosting a great event. So I'm here to present on my role at Arsenal Football Club as a sports scientist, and I also hold over a separate venture called Agents in Football, where we try to change lives through sport. One of the aims of this year, starting from July, is we're trying to raise £100,000 for a school out in Jharkhand called US School, and I would love for the support of our community to help me raise that money. Social media link is Instagram is Asians in Football, or you can follow my personal one, which is The Football Scientist. Asians in Football has started since December of last year, where we ventured out to Jharkhand, Ranchi in India to work with US School. We documented the whole journey. We have a great documentary that we wish to put out later on this year. We then ventured out over to Toronto, where we then connected with that community and tried to raise awareness of the cause of trying to raise £100,000 for the football pitch. One important thing I would like to mention to the people watching this channel is I would love for the community to get together more and try to push each other, not support, push one another in trying to get into sport, bringing us more together as a community. And doing that, if it has to be through sport or just in general, let's try to change the lives of many people in this world.
My name's Dara Chauhan. I'm a Director for Corporate and Commercial Banking at NatWest. And today we held our event at the RBS Sikh Network, honouring our past and embracing our future. This was our second annual event, and we had over 200 people in attendance. The RBS Sikh Network has grown massively since its inception in March last year, and we now have over 800 members across the bank. Today we had a really topical panel discussion about a variety of issues within our local communities up and down the UK. And having spoken to a lot of our guests, the feedback's been very positive, and we look forward to hosting another event in the near future.